Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew, and if you aren't familiar with Darktrace, we spend a lot of our time thinking about how to detect and respond to cyber attacks for the businesses we work with. And we've been at the forefront for the last 6 years in using AI to detect attacks. But what I want to talk about today is how bad guys are going to use AI and are using AI to run cyber attacks. So this is very much in its infancy. We're just starting to see the fledgling steps of cyber attacks that leverage something like AI in how they're executed. And the question to understand is, why would someone do that? And the reason is that attackers are lazy. Or if not lazy, then they are efficient and driven by return on investment like everyone else. So if you want to go and compromise a business and a target, you have to assess whether it's worth the energy and the effort and the time to do it, because carrying out a successful cyber campaign is not that trivial. High-end cyber attacks have lots of steps. You need to research the target, you need to build a profile, do reconnaissance, case the joint, write custom tools to let you break in, then infiltrate the business, then do more recon, figure out a plan of attack. At every step, your goal as an attacker is to blend in and be stealthy. And it's a game of cat and mouse between the defenders trying to spot you and catch you, and you trying to remain undetected. And at the minute, thankfully, the effort required to pull that off means that the very, very high-end targeted campaigns require humans to do them, and they require a lot of time and investment that only nation states can do. So as of today, you can still align pretty much every kind of cyber attack on a spectrum. On the one hand, you have mass commodity attacks, things like phishing emails. You spray them to everybody, they have a wide impact, but they're not that hard to detect. You can catch them fairly trivially. You can tell with a sniff test if it looks like it was something generated by a machine or whether it looks genuine. The other extreme, you have the highly targeted, highly bespoke campaigns. Those are very, very hard to detect, but they take hours and hours of manual human labor. And the promise, if you like, for the bad guys and the risk to us of AI is that it threatens to collapse that spectrum. Because what it allows you to do is it allows you to automate that currently manual process of tailoring and designing a campaign and do it automatically and replicate it en masse to everybody. So this idea of automation that AI brings in every field has radical impacts in the ability of attackers to scale the cyber attacks that they do across targets of every size. So I'll give you some examples of what that looks like. Here's the simplest possible kind of example. So captchas, everyone knows them. They are about as trivial a form of cybersecurity defense as you can get. And their job is to distinguish humans from bots. And generally speaking, that's what we're doing in every aspect of cyber detection. We're trying to distinguish if the activity that's going on in our business is genuine and the result of an employee or something generated by malware in a machine. And these are meant to be a first pass at something that only humans can do and machines can't do. And obviously this is very broken now. So this is a screenshot from a tool, very easy to do in Python. You train a classifier, it can solve these. And that's a computer reading them and telling you what they are. So this principle is widespread. All over the place we have supervised machine learning algorithms now that are doing these sorts of discrimination tasks that only humans could do before. Presumably you're aware of the sort of captchas from Google that have the streetlights in them where they say, click how many street lamps. If you don't know, which you should know, because I think everyone should know this, what you're doing there is you're training Google's detection systems to be able to break their own captchas. You're training Google's image recognition systems to get better at that. And this kind of escalation happens all the time when you have machine learning algorithms pitted against each other. Here's another example. So one of the most crucial steps in a cyber attack is doing research on your target and being able to write spear phishing emails that pass that sniff test and sound genuine. And that takes time. These days you go on LinkedIn, you find information, and you write an email yourself. This is a screenshot from a web tool called talktotransformer.com. And Max Heinemeyer is one of my colleagues at Darktrace. I wasn't so bold as to put my own name in here because I didn't want to see what it would put up on the screen. But you put in there, Max works for Darktrace, and this is what it generates. And this sounds pretty believable. It's almost exactly right. It's not entirely accurate in the facts, but it definitely sounds like a human wrote it. And the worry here is that if you can automate that process of writing social engineering attacks that sound believable, you can just do that to every target instantly. And that opens up the range of who you can attack massively. I'll give you one example that indicates that attackers are taking this very seriously. There's a botnet and a malware family called Emotet. No reason why you should have heard of it. And it's quite popular. It's a form of banking Trojan. Nothing fancy about that. It infects people's machines and steals their banking credentials. And they released a new version of it earlier this year. And whenever it successfully infected someone's computer, it did what it normally does, but it also grabbed a copy of all their emails and it sent it back to the attacker's infrastructure. And no one knew why. And it was quite mysterious because they didn't seem to have anything to do with email. Then, a few months later, they released an update to the malware. And the way this malware worked was it would send spear phishing emails at the start to trick people and hook them. And what it did was it took the emails that they had previously stolen and it generated new emails with like a re-colon at the start and took that text and swapped links in it with malicious links. And in that way, it looked way more believable than any spam campaign previously. And that's very much a halfway house to this, of being able to, from scratch, generate passable content without needing to first steal the emails. So we're starting to see the first baby steps of this. And the examples I gave are simple ones, but they are only small pieces of the whole framework. So what's down the left-hand side there in orange is a version of what's variously called the kill chain in cybersecurity. The kill chain is the series of steps that you need to do if you want to compromise someone or a business. And it runs from top to bottom. You do recon, you intrude. C2 establishment means getting that link between them, the business, and the attackers. And then you do these things until you steal their data. And on the right are free open source tools available today that automate every one of these steps with machine learning. And you can get this, you can do it today. I'll give you an example on the last one, Yahoo Not Safe for Work framework, if anyone's ever heard of that. There was a cyber attack earlier this year on the German parliament, on the Bundestag, and they stole terabytes and terabytes of data on politicians. And then what they did was, fairly simplistically, the attacker went through it trying to find something compromising that they could then leak to cause influence and disrupt elections and all that stuff that's very popular at the minute. And they did it, but they did it quite slowly, manually, and they didn't find that much juicy stuff. But what the Yahoo NSFW framework does is you throw it a data dump of data that you've stolen, and it sifts through it, and it pulls out anything that looks like explicit content, inflammatory language, adult material, anything that could be compromising. And so now, if you have a data dump as an attacker, you can run it against that, and in about 5 minutes, you can pull out all the potentially damaging information that you need. And every single step can now be automated. What we haven't seen yet is anyone putting all the steps together into one overall framework, one prepackaged tool that uses all this to execute a cyber attack end to end. And it's somewhat baffling why they haven't. We've done this at Darktrace to play with, and it's very effective. Thankfully, it's not being used in the wild yet, but it's only a matter of time until they do it. And when they do it, we're going to see somewhat of a paradigm shift. And I'll give you an example. So the example is, a few years ago, everyone, including the NHS, most famously, got hit with WannaCry. And then we had Petya and not Petya. So if you're not familiar, these were very, very high-profile cyber attacks, and they caused hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of damage. And what they were was they were the combining together of two previously existing, not very exciting things that were sitting there separate, but no one had put them together. They were ransomware that has been around for years and encrypts people's data and demands money. And they were worms or wormable exploits, which are forms of malware that automatically self-propagate from computer to computer. And worms have been around since the 90s, but no one had combined a worm with ransomware. Very simple idea, but once they combined it, we experienced this massive jump in terms of the speed of attacks and the damage of attacks. And everyone was caught unprepared by this. And that's exactly what's going to happen when the first publicly, commonly available AI-based malware framework gets in the wild. And once we start getting AI attacks, it's going to be very, very hard to keep up because these will operate at machine speed, they will operate against everyone, and they will be very, very stealthy, and they'll blend in. So what do? Well, thankfully, for quite a while now, people have been using AI on the good side to defend businesses from cyber attack. But a lot of what's traditionally been done doesn't quite cut it. So the traditional approach to using machine learning over the last 10 years to defend against cyber attack has largely been supervised machine learning trained on data to recognize malware. So what I mean is you can train supervised algorithms very easy to do things like recognize dogs and cats, and they get trained for that task. And however you train these systems, you need lots of data, and what you do is you show them millions of pictures of dogs and millions of pictures of cats, and then you show them a new picture and you ask it, is it a dog or a cat? And it's very good at making that decision, but it's based on historical data. And so what people have been doing for a long time is the same thing for cybersecurity. They've thrown hundreds of thousands of examples of malware at classifiers and hundreds of thousands of examples of non-malware in the hope to teach these to recognize malware. It works fairly well, but the problem is that it's still historic in that it's backwards looking and it's based on previously seen attacks. So when you come across a unique bespoke attack that doesn't use previously available malware, but it's been designed for that target, which is what these AI tools threaten to do, it's something novel, hasn't been seen before, and they're not very good at spotting that. So we need to be a bit smarter about how we approach defense. Because if you think about how humans do this in my industry, they don't go looking for things they've seen before. So threat hunting is a discipline within cybersecurity of the people whose job it is to go digging to find attackers lurking inside networks. And this is somewhat of a simple representation of the thought process that they do, right? It's you get a lead, you get some tip-off, something strange is happening, and then you begin hypothesis formation. So you go, that looks strange, I don't know what that is, that doesn't look right to me. What could be behind this? What could be causing this? Can I explain to myself what benign, legitimate employee activity would give rise to this? Or does it look weird to me and I can't explain it? Could it be a bad guy? And this process is very different to traditional ways of looking with machine learning for cyber attack, because it doesn't start by recognizing something it knows, it starts by recognizing something it doesn't know. That looks weird, now can I explain it? So the way to deal with AI-based attacks at scale is to replicate this process, replicate the way humans do investigations with machine learning. So the first step, the lead, is quite relatively simple. That's classic unsupervised machine learning anomaly detection. So that's just something doesn't look normal. And that's not a very hard data science challenge to do. So that bit's kind of okay. You're just looking for spikes and outliers in data sets. You're looking through all the 99% of the haystack for the 1% that looks weird. So we've got unsupervised machine learning algorithms. They're very good at that. They can find the weird stuff. That bit's kind of solved. The next bit is the trickier bit, the hypothesis formation, interpretation, decision-making about what could be behind this. And the key here, and this is what's happened in the last couple of years in my industry, is to realize that the data to solve that problem lies in watching what people do, what the good guys do, not in looking at malware and examples of cyber attacks. Because the slide I showed you with the dogs and the cats, it's trained on previous examples of malware, that learns how to recognize malware. But we want to learn how to do hypothesis formation. And so you don't give it loads and loads and loads of examples of malware, you give it loads and loads of examples of people doing their jobs and investigating cyber attacks. So the way this works is you get a team of people, hundreds of expert threat hunters doing their job, and you track everything they do with their consent. And you record every click they do, every website they go to, every step they do in that investigative journey. And you gather all that data, and that's your data set. That's what you want to capture the intrinsic knowledge in and distill it out and replicate it in a machine learning platform, not what the attackers do, what the good guys do when they're investigating it. And if you do this and you extract out these data points and you train it, you can build systems that are very effective at replicating that process, taking the leads from weird things happening somewhere inside a business and then running it through this hypothesis formation. What could this be? What explanation is there behind this journey, and reaching an answer? And the key here is that these good machine learning, virtual, digital, AI-based security people, they can operate at the speed and the scale that we need to tackle this challenge, because there is, like in every industry, a massive skill shortage in the cybersecurity community of people that can do this. So we firmly believe that this is the direction that the industry is going. It's going to be a escalation in algorithms between the bad guys using more and more effective techniques at blending in and hiding and being stealthy, and the good guys using ever more sophisticated algorithms that are crucially trained on replicating the way we detect threats, not trained on recognizing previous attacks. And what we think is going to happen here, and this is somewhat of a bold prediction, is that within about 5 years' time, this entire domain will be exclusively the purview of machines, in that the scale and speed of cybersecurity will be the sort of problem that cannot really have human involvement in it. At the minute, when we work with customers, there's usually a human in the loop somewhere. You have AI machine learning helping them, but there's still a bottleneck of humans stepping in and making decisions. And that bottleneck has to go away eventually. Because if we want to deal with attacks that replicate at machine speed, we have to have autonomous response and autonomous decision making. And we think that within 5 years, the networks that underpin our businesses will be being designed, built, attacked, and defended entirely autonomously by systems that we don't really understand and we can't keep up with. But whether this arms race will turn out to be won by the bad guys or the good guys is something that I'm not too pessimistic about, because there is a crucial point in the favor of the good guys here, which is the idea of home turf advantage, which is data is the lifeblood of every kind of AI application. And if you're trying to break into a business or you're trying to defend a business, the defender has way, way more data to work with. And what I mean by that is if you train defensive systems to spot cyber attacks, they have all the information about what everyone in that business does, every system for the last year, 2 years, however long they've been running. They understand that business perfectly. The attacker comes in and they have a tiny window into that world. They typically compromise one person or one laptop or one phone. And from that one phone or one laptop, they have to figure out how to blend in, how to act stealthily, how to avoid detection. And they'll get very good at it. But if we correctly leverage the data that's sitting in our businesses, then there's enough in there to keep the good guys one step ahead and ultimately, we hope, win that conflict. Thank you.